Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Josh Kuntz from the state of Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. He is their CISO over there and very active in the state and helping to build new leadership. Joshua, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity to begin with.
Sure. So I started out in the Marine Corps, uh, went to college, figured out that majoring in beer and women was not conducive to a degree plan, enlisted in the Marine Corps.
I know a
Did
bunch of people that would disagree with that, but hey.
so we so I enlisted in the Marine Corps, spent 6 years there doing electronics maintenance. And then when I got out, I started with the state at the Texas Department of Public Safety. Ended up running their satellite system for the Texas Law Enforcement Telecommunications Network uh, for approximately almost 8 years, and that was kind of my introduction. That was my bridge from the physical security things that I'd learned in the Marine Corps to the electronic security around securing those networks and securing that data, because it was highly regulated data, CISO data.
Yeah.
And it was life and death. It was supporting all the police departments and sheriff's offices throughout the state. So they don't, when that system's not up, they don't run traffic stops because they don't know who they're stopping, and they could walk up on a fleeing felon and end up dead. So that really solidified the importance of the electronic security for me.
Yeah, and
After
that's,
doing,
I guess, why A is a key part of the triad, right?
oh yeah, and so making that transition, I then went to the Texas Youth Commission, and that's youth prisons. That was another highly regulated industry. It's not only is it criminal justice information, it's youth criminal justice information. So there's twice as many regulations on that data. And I was their first information security officer and built out their program. Before that, security in the state was really this. Oh yeah, that's a thing that Jody over in IT does. And about that time, that's when the state was really getting serious about, you have to have a program. You have to have somebody dedicated to doing that program. And so I built out their program, took them through 3 audit cycles, and then ended up going over to the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. At that time, they were splitting off from Textation um, the functions that were customer facing. So it was the motor carrier, so long haul trucking, oversized overweight permitting, that kind of thing. The motor vehicle distributor manufacturers and dealers, and then vehicle title and registration. So those are big three, and those are all very different kinds of activities, but all centered around transportation. And again, I was faced with some life and death stuff. The oversized overweight permitting, the, those trucks, if they did not have the right permitting or they went off route, people died, and that was kind of serious. So uh, so I built out their program. I was with them for about 7 years, and then moved over to the Texas Workforce Commission. Uh, and there we had 5 different missions. That was even more fun. Uh, Unemployment insurance, where we both paid out and collected, and I was there during COVID, so that became
Oh,
much.
wow. Yeah, that must have just blown up, and on top of
Oh
that, I assume you're sending everybody home, and so now you've got this massive remote workforce that you weren't prepared for?
no, no, both a massive remote workforce that we had not anticipated. We had remote work, but we never anticipated more than maybe 20, 30, 20 to 30% of the staff being remote at any one time. So we went from 20 to 30% to 90%, and that was a big shift. And our IT department had to scale up. Um, I think I was in solid meetings for the first 4 or 5 weeks. That was 8 hours of meetings. I don't know when, and it was basically I'd attend meetings and assign things out for my staff for trying to make sure that we didn't go off the rails. For the most part, I just collected information so that once things slowed down, we could go back and take a look at the risks that we'd inherited during that period of time.
I
Uh,
mean, I think that's how everybody did it. Like, we've gotta keep the business up and running first and foremost. We can lock it down a little bit later. I know we all wanna do that in the opposite direction,
oh
but,
yeah.
there's times when you can't, and I think that's the best approach. Just keep that running list so that, you know what you have to go back and fix.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think that's why I've been so successful in my career as a security professional in the state, is because I never viewed security as black and white. Right? Security is a thousand shades of gray. It's
Yes, it is.
of risk you're willing to accept, and you have to also understand that the the business is not security. I mean, unless
No.
you are a security
Well,
company,
mine is, but most aren't.
unless you're a security company, the end product's not security. The end product is some other good or service, and the security is just there to enable you to do it without getting
Yeah,
hacked, get in trouble, stopping business due to. I mean, that's something that's come around recently that's been a real game changer.
yeah.
But yeah, at TWC, it was, I think I had 7 federal audits every 3 years because of all the regulated data. We did early childhood education, uh, criminal. See the civil rights. So we
CJIS.
did both equal housing and equal opportunity, let's see, equal employment opportunity, and then for the state we had vocational rehabilitation things for people with disabilities to obtain or retain employment through assistive services. So we had HIPAA data because we were the people paying for the medical procedures. So actually, HIPAA actually applied to us. We had IRS data, so I had to do Pub 1075 through all of that, and Social Security Administration, Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement, the Department of Labor, 2 different audits from the Department of Labor, plus the CISO audit. It was a lot. There's a lot to keep up with. So almost half of my staff was GRC just to keep up with audits and compliance
Yeah.
there.
And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that compliance and GRC becomes the such a focal point in most programs, and, even though, we wish it was best practices, at the end of the day, we don't wanna get fines from auditors, and so, there's so much time that's eaten up around compliance, particularly in your sector. Rarely do sectors hit or organizations hit multiple different regulated, things, but in the SLED space, it's very common to have 3, 4, 5, in your case, 7 different
Oh,
audits.
it was. It was
That's a lot. I think that's a lot for any company.
yeah, but it was a good experience. And during that time, so managing through all of that during that time, I was actually able to execute a move of the cybersecurity program out from under IT. So that was for me a very large accomplishment. And the people asked me, and in fact, my executive director asked me during that time, says, "Well, do you think that no security program belongs in IT?" And I said, "No." So when you're a small organization, and you're starting out, everybody's doing every job, and you have to overlap, and it's all intertwined. But once you get to a level of maturity and size where you have specialization, at that point security goes from being a very tactical thing, not that you're not doing the tactical security, to being a strategic thing. And that's where the GRC comes in, and you become an oversight entity over the IT operations. And
Yeah,
that's where you switch over and say, well, if I'm going to be doing oversight, I can't really be reporting to the people I'm doing oversight on.
yeah.
You end up with a conflict of interest, and quite frankly, it was very clear, and this was some of the evidence, is that I spent almost 4 years at that agency, and I left at the same salary I started at, because I
That's no
was
good.
very. I was always tactful, and I was always courteous, but I had a very good understanding of the cybersecurity statutes and could quote them back to my leadership verbatim, which helped me articulate when there was something that wasn't right. But that was extraordinarily frustrating because I was the guy of no, because they'd want to do something like, well, this statute or this regulation says we can't, so we really need to figure out a way to do it right. And so I was the impediment and
Yeah.
squeaky
You
wheel. So
became Doctor No because of all of the compliance, and I know that's one of the things, and it sounds like you're very much on the opposite side. You don't wanna be Doctor No,
no,
but sometimes you have to be, and I think that's a really great point you bring up because so often we talk about how we don't wanna be Doctor No, and it comes up all the time on this. Rarely, I don't think it's ever come up before actually, has this side of it where you're saying, "Hey, I mean, because of all of the regulations, I had to say no constantly." I find that fascinating. Um,
well, and it's unfortunate it's because IT had been allowed, and this happens a lot in the state. You know, IT is this mysterious thing that happens in a black box, right? And
yeah,
and especially in the private sector, CIOs are only there. There's only three jobs, right? It's innovation. Let's make something new. You know, make something more efficient. Help the bottom line. Operation. You know, the email has to keep going. The servers have to stay up, and maintenance, and that's
yeah.
keeping track of. The only one they're measured on really is innovation. I mean, that's the KPI that CIOs are measured on is are you adding value to the organization? Operations is neutral at best and negative if it goes down. If something goes down, then you're mud. But as long as everything's working, you're not getting kudos for keeping the email running. The only person who cares about the maintenance is the CISO, and so that's where you have that tension. And I because of that, I just kept doing whatever they wanted, and they kept pushing the maintenance down the road, or they'd want to shortcut things and skip steps. It's like, hey guys, we can't skip these steps. You got to do it. And that's where the no came in. I think I was there about 2 weeks. Started out with a bang and killed two projects. Two projects were trying to go live. We go to the go live meeting, and I'm looking at the documentation. Where's the security testing? Like, we need security testing. I said, yes, you are going to be transacting in confidential information on the internet. It's in statute. You have to do the security testing.
I will say that was my favorite part of being at the SEC was killing projects.
I, I don't enjoy it, but it was something where I had two projects in. Now they weren't major projects; they were smaller projects, but they were significantly changing the way we were doing business externally with customers. I said, you cannot do this without going through the security testing.
And
And
I joke, it wasn't as much about, killing them. I mean, they always came back, well, almost always. There was one time, where we we quite literally found a different finding for each and every one of the OWASP top 10
oh,
vulnerabilities in it, and that was the one that didn't come back, but most of them they were just delayed, we'd say, "Okay, you forgot about this, this, and this. You got some huge, serious, vulnerabilities here. Get them resolved, and then we can improve this," but, it was it was different though, because I was a penetration tester. I didn't have the full, I guess, view that I have now where, I was much more rigid. It has to be my way. And then as I grew and got into a CISO role, and then even more so when I got into a CEO role, it helped me to learn to really balance things. And I think
right,
one really eye-opening, I guess, conversation that I had with my dev team earlier on in Fish Firewall, we had this huge vulnerability that somehow made it into production, and I'm like, "Why? How did this get into production? Why on earth would you do this?" And they came back and they said, "'Cause you said we had to get the feature pushed by Friday." And I'm like, "Oh man, I've become that stereotypical CEO." Um, but it helped me really realize that, it's not so black and white. To your point about it being a thousand shades of gray, it really is because there's this art form to balancing security and productivity, and I don't think everybody has the ability to easily do that. I do think it's a little bit of a talent, because there is that very fine line between, "Oh, no, we're ransomed, and, we gotta still be operational."
absolutely.
And it's not a big, it's sort of like a very tiny little line that you gotta stay on there. Had said before we got started, you were telling me a little bit about some of your work in the education space to help sort of train and breed that next generation of CISO. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So my first foray into that was actually at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Um, Within the state, we'd identified for several years that the largest failing was that we did not have a trained workforce in cybersecurity. We had a very small amount of people who actually had certifications, or who had any real formal cybersecurity training. And so I developed a public-private partnership with a trainer, because we had a large training conference room at that organization, and worked out, hey, if I provide the space, can you provide the training at a discount? And I said, what would that be? I said, you don't have to pay for any rental or anything. Just what does it cost for the materials and you to do it for about 30 people at a time? And they ended up coming in at like $1,500, which was over $1,000 less than you could get it commercially. And so I ended up doing 3 rounds of that, so I ended up getting about 90 people in the state certified. And then, so that started my desire to, increase the acumen of our cybersecurity professionals in the state. Well, in my current role,
Yeah.
I got cornered at a happy hour by a couple of senior analysts asking me about cybersecurity budgets and the legislative process, and I was explaining it, and they said, "How do you know this stuff? That's not security." I said, "Well, I've been doing this for 22 years, and before that, my father had been a state administrator for 25 years, and so I learned this stuff at the dinner table." And they said, "Well, how do you do it if you don't have those things?" And I had to start thinking there's not really a program for that. The state has a program for building a
There
generation
isn't.
of executive directors, agency heads or CEOs. They have a program for building out the next generation of CIOs. They really had nothing for the security side. And I'd been through the CIO program, and it was about 40% of it applied to me. It was just the general leadership part. 60% of it was around IT operations. Interesting to know, but I wasn't going to be using that as a CISO. And so myself and 2 other CISOs in the state got together and developed a curriculum and a program where we met. We currently meet once a month, 2 hour, basically a long lunch on a Friday, where we bring in a sponsor. So because we're the state, we don't have a lot of money. We partner with vendor sponsors, folks that have a security product that's available to the state through state contracts, where they get about 10 or 15, 20 minutes to demo their product or talk about the service that they have. And then we have we have lunch, and then we have about an hour and a half discussion on a particular topic. And we start with, when you first walk into a program, how do you evaluate the program? And we move through, how do you evaluate staff? How do you evaluate, your budget? How do you deal with the legislative session? All those things where you can, progress through. If I started at a new program, how do I figure out how to make that work? Our first cohort had 9 mentees and 3 mentors, so we took on a lot. And so you had the session, and then you meet with your mentees in between sessions to kind of discuss the topics, what they've got going on, how it might apply to their current job, or how we see that helping them develop. That program went from last October to this September. In October, we started a new cohort. This one was 13 mentees and 10 mentors. So not only did I have an increase in desire for people to participate in the program from a learning standpoint, but also other CISOs who wanted to participate as mentors. So each of us only have to do like 1 or 2 mentees per, instead of I think I had 4 last time. So that was,
Oh, wow. That's a lot of work, especially with being a full-time
yes.
CISO.
Now that's only due to this job. So when I came here to this agency from TWC, I went from those 7 federal programs to no federal programs. We do professional licensing and consumer safety regulation. So we license and everything. We have 38 programs, everything from barbers and cosmetologists to combative sports. We are the boxing commission. So the Tyson Jake Paul fight, we ran that. To
Okay, was it
n-
rigged?
No, not from people talk about all the goofy things in the contract. The contracts are very standard. There was no, hey, if it ends in the first round, you don't get paid. None of that. They were very standard contracts. Now, if they had agreements outside of that, that's not something we but we had standards.
I was disappointed. I mean, part of me was, well, hey, he's made it, this many rounds. Part of me was like, nah, Jake Paul really should have been down in the first round, like Tyson
Oh yeah,
always does,
which a couple of times it looked like that's what was going to happen, and I think the hurt knee really put him off, where he couldn't move as good as he had anticipated. Um, so,
Yeah,
but elevator inspection,
we
voice
digress.
inspections, we got all these different programs. So we collect fees on the licensing, and we do inspections, and we that kind of, but we don't give out money, right? Unlike at the last job where we had unemployment benefits and we had child care subsidies, so billions of dollars going out. We don't get, we collect some money, and either we collect it physically, like you send us a check, we deposit it with the state, or if you're going to do it online, you go to the state's credit card processor. It's not even us. So I have very low threat profile, and a lot of
Well,
fraud.
that's
Where it's
good.
like, if you're going to operate without a license, you don't have to hack in and get a license. You just operate without a license until you get caught. So that lower threat profile has allowed me the actual breathing room to do a program like this. So that's been very good. It's just a good timing. But yes, it is a lot of effort, a lot of time. And so, but my father was a huge mentor, and so I kind of inherited that, and really wanted to continue that legacy of mentorship.
Well, I think it's great to help out the younger generation. I look at so many times when I was in situations where I had no clue how to handle it. I really had to just learn through trial and error. I couldn't ask an AI like you can now, and so I think about that, and I'm like, yeah, I really do want to help and give back, and to me, it's starting with people in school, letting them know that cybersecurity
Hmm.
is a career. For me, I did not know it was a career, and so I spent a good bit of time in marketing, ironically enough, even though I was very technical. I taught myself to code back in, high school. I spent some time in marketing because that's what really, the marketing dean just found me and said, "You're gonna be in marketing," and I said, "Okay," because I was young and dumb. And and it worked out. It actually worked out a lot because one of the things that I really discovered is how critical some of those marketing teachings are for the
Hmm.
cybersecurity space. When we're out trying to change culture, we are marketing to the people inside of our
Oh,
organization. When people talk about social engineering for good, it's just marketing. And there's a lot of study that's really gone into that. But before I switch gears over to that, my favorite question to ask absolutely every guest is, if you had to choose one, and I know it's not so simple, it's more shades of gray, but we're going to make this black and white. If you had to choose one, carrot or stick, what would it be and why?
as much as the security marine in me wants to say stick, it's the carrot. Um, and because it's much more effective to provide a benefit or a an understanding of how secure, and we try to do this in all of our cybersecurity education, is this isn't just for you. This, take these lessons, or if I send out alerts, take these to your family, let them know so that they don't fall
Yeah.
victim. And
Tell your
trying to,
parents.
especially parents, elderly parents, trying to provide benefit to all of our staff, instead of just, well, you're going to do it because I said you're going to do it, because then they'll find a way around it. If you make it too authoritarian,
Yeah.
they'll just find a way to get around it, and that's not the goal. The goal is to influence the behavior, and generally that behavior is influenced through positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. um,
Yeah, you gotta make them want to be more secure, and when you say, "Great job, you're a cyber hero," and things like that, that makes them want to. When you crack the whip, you're right, and that's not the first time that that's come up with, people saying, "Hey, if you crack the whip too hard or use this too much of the stick," people will find a way around it. They may comply, but they're only complying because they have to, and they're gonna look for ways around what they're doing or what they're told to do. So I couldn't agree more. I'm a really big fan of Carrot too. I was curious since you were ex-Marine, which way you'd go with that. But no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that old adage, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, is so true, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity. Any good stories of a time maybe that you were able to use a stick over a carrot and how it
Well,
worked?
so I'll go back to my last agency. I had to use the stick a lot, um, because it. Well, I was put in a position where the stick was the only thing they listened to. So anytime I would come in, I'd have a statutory citation and a rule citation, and okay, this it's not me telling you have to do this; it's the legislature telling you have to do it, and and this is where and the consequence of not doing it is having to face the legislature come the budget time and explain why you're not being compliant, because they look at the audits and they look at your incidents, and they want to know, what are you doing to maintain the integrity, the confidentiality, and the availability of the citizens' data. That's something that we forget
Yeah.
a lot of times in public sector. We get so focused on the fact that it's oh well, we're just doing this work, go through the motions, try to get more money. It's public service, and the first part of that service. So we are providing a service to the citizens, and they entrust us with a lot of their very confidential data, and we have to uphold that. And so that
Yeah.
I've had, like I said, I had to use a stick a lot because they'd lost sight of that a lot of times, and it was, how can I do this most expediently, with the least amount of resistance, and get the product out there. And usually the fastest way is not the most secure. um,
No, it's never been in my experience. I wish we had security baked in. I mean, we're moving to all these new, yes, more secure languages for development, but security is still not just baked in. It's still something you have to put in on top of things, and it's how you code. And I just feel like it's 2024. We should have a language that's just secure by default by now. But I digress. Okay, so a couple of things that I love to talk about in addition to where we've already gone is one of the things is role-based training. I find that it's really interesting to see how different people approach role-based training. And so I'm curious from your perspective, when I say role-based training, in an awareness, perspective, what do you think of? And the follow-up to that would be, what should be prioritized? You can only cover so many roles, so if you're going to go down that path, uh, what does it mean to you?
So we start out. Well, I'll say this. So I attend every new employee orientation. We do two a month. So we first and 15th, and I have about 15 minutes where I go through some standard things just to make sure we level set with everybody. Um, and and that starts the baseline, and then we have a baseline. Everybody takes the state approved cybersecurity awareness training. After that, we have additional training for privileged users, right? So for our IT administrators that have that higher level access, they all have to go through extra training. Our finance folks go
Good.
through additional training, both on the finance side and cybersecurity. Um, our CFO has worked with us. We have a commercial off the shelf cybersecurity awareness module tool, and we in that you have a bunch of preloaded training modules, and she went through and selected 12 of them. She said, I want one a month for my staff, in addition to any cybersecurity training that you're doing. Hey, great. So that's where you're seeing those wins within the business side. They're going, hey, this is important, and my people are higher risk
Yeah.
because we're handling the money. So I want them to have more training. I didn't even have to enforce that. I
If I'm a CFO, I'm more scared of that wire going out to the wrong place than the CISO is. I
oh
mean, both, it should keep both up at night, but as a CFO,
oh
that
God,
terrifies
yes. And that's quite frankly, they're the highest value target because they're the ones paying out. That's who's paying the invoice. So your accounts payable.
yeah, large invoices too. It only takes a second for
Oh yeah.
$1,000,000 to be gone. And I've seen it happen before where the team was tricked into sending a wire. We just saw actually, it's a great sort of segue into AI, but we just saw the deep fake in Hong Kong that tricked the guy into sending 25 million after he said, no, I'm not going to fall for this fish. And then they're like, oh, just jump on the Zoom. And he falls for the deep fake instead. But I mean, I think that's one of those things that everyone's worried about. We are starting to see it more and more. I talked to a CISO of a bank the other day, who his CEO had already been faked a number of times and their employees targeted. And so I think it's really blowing up. Um, I really like what you're doing there, and just before we jump over to AI, a couple things you said that I find or I really agree with. Um, Anyone who has a great deal of access needs that extra training. It's that with great power comes great responsibility training. That's what I've always called it. But no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that often IT teams are overlooked. And being an ethical hacker, I learned that while it was the mistakes of the user that got us in, it was the mistakes of IT that let us get full control of the system. And it was often the lack of staying on top of the MITRE attack framework that would allow us to stay in the network without being detected. And so to me, I look at it and think, we've got to train those most critical roles. And I've always been a big fan of training IT, yet so often it's neglected.
Well, in the state, we actually
Um,
they instituted a program. So not only are they doing the cybersecurity certification training for cybersecurity personnel, but then they also have secure development training, and it's free to the agency. So we don't. That's an allocation that's given to our centralized IT agency, and
yeah.
they provide this training. And so we get these. I get these notifications, and I send them on to the application development manager. Say, hey, look, if you have anybody who hasn't been through a training and you want to send them, have them log into the portal and do it. There's no cost. You don't have to do a purchase request, and I'm the only one who has to approve it. And I always say yes. So, giving them some additional training in secure coding helps with that IT, not making it easy for the bad guy to get in and move around.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think so much of OWASP is about making sure that they know about the
Hmm.
threat. I think most often developers, while they are one of the more vulnerable links in most organizations, I don't think that they're malicious or they do it on purpose. They just don't know better. And often it's as simple as, hey, let me tell you about SQL injection, how it happens, and how to prevent it. And it takes no more than a minute to explain that, but it has massive impact on the organization.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, I hate to say it, but unfortunately I found application developers to be the most shortcut taking people in the whole organization.
They are. I
They-
had, one customer, it was nothing but devs. So they're like a 250 person company. They've got 230 developers. And so they say, "Hey, we've got really, really low engagement." And we look and, well, 230 people have never done any of the
Ugh.
training. And so I was like, something has to be going on because we're not even seeing opens. Normally we'd get something here. And so I said, let's go take a look. And so they bring in one of their developers and they're like, yeah, we found a rule that shared or that automatically took all the training out of their inbox and just moved it to the trash. And apparently they've shared this throughout the entire team. And they come to me and they're like, "Well, what should we do?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, they asked us to do something about it." And I'm like, "There's nothing I can do." But you could block their ability to write those rules. And so we gave them some advice, but I just always found it as a fascinating story because you're right. Developers, in fact, it shows up in the phishing data. One of the things trends that we've seen is that any fish that promises to save
Oh,
them time, they'll click on. Now it needs to be a little bit, like, tailored. So, like, if they're, using React and Node or something like that, it needs to be around React or Node. But it is interesting how easy it is, to get them to click on the save time stuff. So, yeah, I'll pick on developers too there and agree with you. I don't think we have any listening, mostly security folks. So,
yeah.
um, so AI is man, I mean, just in the last 2 weeks with the 12 days of Christmas and Google going from 0 to hero on AI, a lot has changed. In fact, we are borderline human level intelligence, with the caveat being that this is a PhD trained, human that's an expert in every domain, not just one. Um, so it brings a lot of opportunity, it brings a lot of threat. Even before we go there, is there anything really cool that you've seen in the AI space recently, that you wanna talk about? 'Cause I found it moves so quickly that everyone in our industry is having a difficult time keeping up, and we're the techies.
So I will say this: it's I've used it, and I used it for messaging. So we had an incident where we had some streaming music deals downloaded onto laptops, and I was like, okay, that's it's not an approved software. It eats bandwidth. There's no business justification for
I want
it.
Spotify.
Yeah, I was one of them. And so
It's
then we identified like 40 people in a 580 person agency that had this on their computer. And I start out with a message that was very stick. You know, this is not allowed, and you know that it's not allowed. You just signed the data use agreement, 2 weeks ago that specifically.
but do people really read that?
Well, they signed it. Whether or not they read, they signed it, and you agreed not to do this, and now it's on your computer. Um, and so and I sent it to my staff saying, hey, let's take a look at this. Am I missing anything? Do you see anything obvious? And as a lark, they kicked it into Chat GPT and said, rewrite this like a California surfer. And it was hilarious. It's like, hey, dude, I know the good tunes are vibing, but we really keep doing it. Was hilarious. Made a couple of edits to that, and I told them, I said, oh, I'll use that, and they were floored. They're like, you're gonna send that? Sure. And that's what I did. I sent it to. I basically put all the people who had that on there in the blind CC line, so they got it, but they didn't know who else. I didn't want to shame anybody, and sent it out. And I got more people that emailed me back say, "Hey, I'm sorry, but that message was really funny." And so, going back to the carrot, it gave me the ability to soften the message and still get the point across. Hey, this you can't do this, but do it in a fun way.
Yeah.
I will.
Oh, no, I agree. I've actually used it for, making all kinds of things fun. Like, I had this idea for some, songs, security awareness songs that would just be funny. Actually, you wanna hear
Sure.
one real quick?
Hey, it's
Here.
me, your CFO. No time to ask, just wire $5 million. It's a simple task. Oh, and by the way, I need a jet by noon and a diamond Rolex to match my tune. It's me, your CFO. Send that dough. I need $1 trillion and a golden chateau.
But
Trust my
I
voice,
don't
I'm
know, to me,
legit.
it's
Don't.
amazing that an AI can first both write those words in seconds, and then you plug it into a different AI tool, and you got the
Oh
music
yeah,
just like that.
hilarious.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. I saw one, tool that you can take a picture, and apparently Hollywood's all over this already, because you can take any picture and turn it into a fully editable 3D world. And these 3D worlds are better than what we've been making and creating and spending just tedious hours, and they're done in, under 10
Wow.
minutes.
It's it's really
Okay, so go
really
ahead.
neat. And
Go ahead.
my data management officer is kind of an AI junkie. She's actually a PhD and working on her in her spare time, elusive spare time, working on a human AI model. So, and it's funny. She's talking, yeah, I'm pretty close to getting it complete. I'm like, that's wild.
So, human AI, like, going after that artificial general
Yes.
intelligence? Okay, awesome. I know I've been working on the exact same thing. Maybe that's what all of us work in the background. It sounds like ChatGPT or OpenAI is going to beat us all because what I found interesting. I mean, they released on Friday as their GPT-03, and that actually hit the pre-established benchmark for AGI, and they should have won the award, but they actually moved the target based on the GPT-03, and they made it. They said we have to come up with a harder test, and so that's the only reason that they aren't officially the first AGI right now. Found that interesting. Um, it will be fascinating to see how things change. Like, we're already seeing it improve the capabilities of robots. So they had the new AI tool that came out the other day that allows you to train robots inside of a virtual world, which means you can do millions of hours of simulations in a matter of minutes, and that, can take this robotics program that was 5 years from pushing anything amazing out and get it done in a
Yeah,
week.
the advances in humanoid robots are a little scary. They're,
They are. My wife keeps saying no, and I'm like, "But it can clean the the
oh
bathrooms."
yeah, it's. I mean, they're not far from robotic assistants, and that's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the idea of having a humanoid robot that can clean your house, cook for you, uh, mow the lawn, whatever it needs to do, I think is great, and if it gets hurt, it's not you getting hurt or a person getting hurt, it's a machine that can be
Yeah,
repaired.
but yeah, the
Um, okay, so we are Oh, I was just gonna say we are almost out of time here, and I do want to make sure to save time to just, give you a chance to really just give your sort of final thoughts, if you will, around, whatever advice you have, whether it's to somebody that wants to be a CISO or to somebody even more junior or even to somebody non-technical at all. Whatever advice you have that you think would be valuable for our guests, I'd love for you to share
okay.
it.
Well, and we you talked about this. The pipeline for cybersecurity professionals has changed significantly in the last 10 years. Um, I think I'm a little older than you. So when I came through, there was basically three.
Much, but, you got a little
Yeah,
more gray than me.
just uh, when I came up through cybersecurity, there's three ways, right? You're either a network guy, a server guy, or a desktop person. Every now and then you'd get an application developer that would cross over, but not very frequently. And that was how you came into security. So
True.
from those three disciplines, and now they actually have cybersecurity degrees in college. They have a lot of colleges that are offering these purpose built cybersecurity degrees where you can have somebody coming right out of college with a base level of cybersecurity knowledge. They may not have the experience, but they have the knowledge. Um, and
Yeah.
find for somebody who's coming out and wanting to do cybersecurity, I would say, look for the non-traditional things. Look for apprenticeships. Look for internships, especially your last year in college. I know for the state we do that. We do summer internships. There's a number of agencies that do apprenticeships. There are Department of Labor programs specifically around apprenticeships in technical areas to try to get people who have no technical experience into a pipeline where they can learn on the job. It's basically 50% schooling and 50%, OJT to get in and learn that stuff and not have to go into some other area to get related experience in order to qualify to get into an entry level cybersecurity position. Because let's be honest, entry level cybersecurity positions aren't really entry level. You know, you're at a mid level somewhere else before you get to the entry level of cybersecurity, and so that's where we try
Yeah.
having to try to bridge those gaps has been.
And it's a really well-paid job entry level, so it is very much worth your while to go out and do that
Oh,
internship, because at the end of that internship, there will be
oh,
jobs waiting on you.
100%. I mean, even with the state, my baseline, my cybersecurity analyst one starts at $72,000 for somebody.
Yeah,
And all you, and
exactly.
if you're coming out of college with a degree in cybersecurity, you qualify. So that's
Yeah, for a recent college grad, 72 grand is a
a great
great
place to
salary.
start. And it only goes up from there. And that's in the state. That that doesn't. I'm not even looking at the private sector where you make all the money. That's in a public service where you can do that. And a lot of people, don't understand this. There are programs where if you do 10 years of public service, they'll forgive the rest of your student debt. So that's a way to both make a decent living and get out from underneath crushing student debt. So that's a good way to do that. Little plug for the private or for the public sector. Um, but it's something.
That's how I got my student loans forgiven, so, hey, I'm a big fan personally.
So
So,
it's one of
um,
the
all
ways you
right,
can really
eh
get somebody.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
To a career, not just a job, and it's very impactful. And you see this all over the place where business starts to slump off. They let go some folks. They don't let go of their cybersecurity people, especially in a publicly traded company, because that they're now measured. The SEC is now measuring companies based on their cybersecurity acumen and whether or not they have compliant programs, and that becomes real fines and real penalties for publicly traded companies. So that's
As it
Oh yeah,
should.
and so that's where you can look at something that's stable, something that you're going to have uh, a career path in. It's not just, oh well, I get this job and then I got to figure out where the next job is. That you can really establish a career path in cybersecurity and just find. And that's something I tell people: is try a couple of different things. Figure out if you like the technical things, or you have the aptitude for the compliance. And I will say this: if you have the aptitude for auditing or policy making or risk analysis, there's a lot less of those folks than there are the uh, the white hats who put on the hoodie and sit in the dark room with the computer glow, uh, threat hunting. So it's you're looking
Yeah,
for the highest demand. It's going to be on that GRC side. So if you have the aptitude for it, I recommend that
true.
to folks. Just try it and see if you like it, because if you do, you'll have no problem finding positions, because that's
And once you get into the industry, it's a lot easier to pivot if you did want to move into a different side of cybersecurity. You have the experience, at least somewhat, on your resume at this point. It's gonna make it a lot easier to make
oh
that
yeah,
next jump. Well, thank you for joining us today. We are out of time here, but for those of you who joined in live, thank you so much for joining us. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we will see you in the new